Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most powerful and transformative chapters in American history, but through a lens that isn't often highlighted. When people talk about the civil rights movement, they usually think of famous names like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and John Lewis. Their contributions were monumental, and their actions shaped the direction of the nation. But behind every famous figure were countless individuals whose stories rarely make it into textbooks, documentaries, or mainstream conversations. Today, we're uncovering some of those untold stories of courage, sacrifice, resilience, and determination from everyday people who helped push America toward justice and equality. Many Americans know the civil rights movement through a few iconic events: the Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, Brown v. Board of Education, or the Selma to Montgomery marches. But change didn't come only from these major milestones. It also came from classrooms, kitchens, barbershops, small churches, farmlands, and neighborhoods where ordinary people decided they had endured enough discrimination. These individuals weren't always given microphones or cameras, but their bravery was just as important. Some risked losing jobs, homes, and even their lives. Some faced violence, intimidation, and harassment for doing things as simple as registering to vote, walking into a segregated building, or refusing to back down when someone tried to silence them. One powerful untold story begins with a woman named Claudette Colvin. 9 months before Rosa Parks sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, Claudette, a 15-year-old student, refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. At the time, segregation laws demanded that black passengers give up their seats for white passengers. Claudette refused, and she was dragged off the bus, arrested, and taken to jail. She later said she felt like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth were pushing down on her shoulders, encouraging her not to move. Her bravery set the stage for everything that followed, yet she rarely gets the same recognition. Many believed she was too young or didn't fit the public image they wanted to present, so her story stayed quiet for decades. But without her courage, the movement might have unfolded very differently. Another story often overlooked involves the Freedom Riders. People remember the violence they faced, but not the full picture of who they were or what they accomplished. These were interracial groups of young men and women, many still in college, who rode buses through the Deep South to challenge segregation in interstate travel. What many don't know is that some Freedom Riders were brutally beaten, arrested, and nearly killed. In one horrifying incident in Anniston, Alabama, a mob firebombed their bus and tried to trap them inside. Even after surviving such attacks, many of them insisted on continuing the journey. Their courage pressured federal authorities to finally enforce anti-segregation laws that had been ignored for years. There were also thousands of unknown activists working in local communities, teaching people how to read so they could pass unfair literacy tests required for voting. These literacy tests weren't designed to measure knowledge, they were designed to exclude black voters. Sometimes the tests asked impossible questions like, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? Other times the test giver would simply fail black applicants no matter their answers. Volunteers who helped people study or attempted to register voters were often threatened by police, fired from their jobs by employers, or targeted by white supremacist groups. Yet, these volunteers continued, often late into the night, because they believed voting was essential to freedom. One of the most heartbreaking untold stories is that of Fannie Lou Hamer. She grew up in deep poverty working on a plantation in Mississippi. In 1962, she tried to register to vote, and because of that, she was fired, kicked out of her home, and later beaten so severely in jail that she suffered permanent injuries. But her spirit only grew stronger. She became one of the most powerful voices of the movement, telling the world what was happening in the South. Her famous words still echo, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Her story proves how courage can come from the most unexpected places. Young people played a huge part in the movement too, even though they're rarely mentioned. The Children's Crusade in Birmingham is one example. Hundreds of schoolchildren marched to protest discrimination. Police turned fire hoses and attacked dogs on them, sending many to jail. These were kids, some as young as 6 or 7, but they stood firm. Their bravery shocked the nation and pressured leaders to take action. It was a turning point that helped push the government toward passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Another often overlooked story is that of Emmett Till's mother, Mamie Till Mobley. When her 14-year-old son was brutally murdered in Mississippi for allegedly whistling at a white woman, she made the courageous decision to hold an open casket funeral. She wanted the world to see what had been done to her child. Thousands of people viewed his body and photos circulated across the country. Her courage in the face of tragedy helped ignite the civil rights movement because she refused to let the world stay silent. It's also important to remember the role of Black women who worked behind the scenes. Ella Baker, one of the most influential organizers of the movement, believed in empowering ordinary people rather than relying on a few leaders. She helped create the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, which organized sit-ins, voter registration drives, and large protests. Although she didn't seek fame, her grassroots strategies shaped the movement's most powerful actions and inspired future generations of activists. There were also unsung heroes in the legal system. Lawyers like Constance Baker Motley, the first Black woman to argue a case before the Supreme Court, spent years fighting segregation in courts across the country. She helped write the argument for Brown v. Board of Education and fought for equal rights in schools, housing, and public places. Her courtroom victories changed American law forever, yet her name is often overshadowed. Churches played a central role as well. They weren't just places of worship, they were meeting grounds, safe spaces, and planning centers. Pastors, choir members, mothers, deacons, teenagers, everyone had a role. These local networks helped organize marches, fundraisers, boycott support systems, and safety plans. Many who participated risked having their churches bombed or burned, something that tragically happened multiple times, including the devastating bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church that took the lives of 4 young girls. Their loss became a painful symbol of the violence activists faced. Another lesser-known part of the movement was the role of white allies who stood up against segregation, sometimes at great personal cost. Some were teachers who integrated classrooms, ministers who preached equality, or activists who joined marches. Many lost their jobs or faced threats because they refused to stay silent. Their stories show that the struggle for equality crossed racial lines and required collective courage. Then there were people whose courage was expressed in small but meaningful ways, business owners who provided food or supplies for boycotts, families who opened their homes to activists traveling across the South, neighbors who watched over children so their parents could attend meetings. These acts weren't glamorous, but they were vital. The movement wasn't simply built on speeches, it was built on community. One powerful example of this everyday courage happened during the Montgomery bus boycott. For more than a year, thousands of Black residents refused to ride city buses. They walked miles to work. Car owners formed carpool systems and drove people every morning and evening. Churches collected money for shoes because walking wore them out. Women cooked food and organized supplies. The boycott succeeded because ordinary people refused to give up day after day for 381 days. Their determination transformed the nation. Many untold stories also come from people who never intended to become activists. Some were pushed into the movement because of an injustice they personally experienced. Others simply found themselves in the middle of history. Their contributions remind us that social change doesn't always come from people who set out to make history. It often comes from those who refuse to accept injustice any longer. As we look back on these stories today, it's important to remember that the civil rights movement wasn't just about big speeches or famous marches. It was about people, ordinary people, who believed in a better future and were willing to endure extraordinary hardships to make it real. Their stories may not always be found in history books, but they shaped the direction of the movement just as much as its most famous leaders. The movement taught the world that change is possible when people unite, even when the odds are stacked against them. It showed that courage comes in many forms. Some forms are loud and public, others are quiet and hidden. But all are powerful. These untold stories remind us that equality and justice are not gifts, they are the result of sacrifice, determination, and unwavering spirit. As we wrap up this exploration, it's worth reflecting on how these untold stories continue to influence the present. Courage shown by these individuals set the foundation for future generations to demand equality in education, workplaces, voting, housing, and more. Their actions continue to inspire modern movements advocating for justice and human rights. Understanding their stories helps us appreciate how far society has come and how much responsibility we have to continue pushing forward. Thank you for watching and taking the time to explore these powerful and often unheard stories. If you found this video meaningful, feel free to share your thoughts and reflections in the comments. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and ensures they're never forgotten. Be sure to stay connected for more eye-opening historical content as we continue uncovering the stories that shaped our world.